Let me ask you some questions. You were the former White House press secretary. The current White House press secretary, Karoline Leavitt, has just announced that she's going to be departing. She'll leave at the end of the month. She just had a second baby. She wants more time, she has said, with her family here. In your book, the first rule that you wrote for a press secretary is don't lie. Is it possible to serve as a press secretary to Donald Trump and maintain that rule?
No, because you have an audience of one. Donald Trump is her audience. He clearly loves her, as far as we know. She is very good at commanding that room, though I will say, as you know well, the room has massively changed since I was there. It's much more filled with people who are there to kind of applaud Donald Trump and people who are there to spit out the Republican given talking points than the room that I was working in. Let me say one thing about her, though. I was the communications director when I had a baby. It is very hard to do that. And she has a toddler and she just had a newborn. I don't know her. I don't know all of the reasons, but I certainly understand the difficulty of trying to balance those things.
You talk about the changes in the White House briefing room. I witnessed these firsthand, having been there for Obama, then Trump, then Biden, then Trump again. There were a lot more sort of friendlies, as they're sometimes described, those people who support the president's view as opposed to view themselves as an independent journalist. What is the risk of the sort of changing system in the way the president relates to the press and those people who are invited into the room?
Well, I think if you're watching the briefing, and most Americans are not watching the totality of the briefing.
But even in the Oval Office, frankly.
Or in the Oval Office, in both places. Look, I think, first of all, as you know well, but for anybody watching, there's still excellent journalists who are there to grill the White House, no matter who the press secretary is and who the president is in the room. It's just that they are a smaller percentage of people in the room. And what is difficult, if you're a viewer watching the briefing or clips of it or watching the president be questioned in the Oval Office, is you don't know how to differentiate. How do you know who these people are? Is it Marjorie Taylor Greene's boyfriend, who is literally, or now husband, who is literally one of the people asking questions about Trump's fitness, physical fitness?
Sean Spicer, a former White House press secretary, was sometimes in the room asking the new press secretary questions.
Exactly. And it becomes a larger percentage of the questions asked in the room. So therefore, people are not getting actual transparent information, or they're not able to rely on the journalists who are in the room to ask the questions that need to be asked.
Let me ask you about the backdrop to this conversation. Earlier this week, we learned about this situation overseas in Turkey where the president changed from Air Force One to a smaller government plane. Ultimately, it becomes Air Force One because he's on it. But the reporters and many members of the staff who were still on that decoy plane didn't know they were on a plane that was apparently being threatened by the Iranians at that time. A day later, basically, we learned that Karoline Leavitt is leaving. Just your gut on this, and also isn't one your responsibility is not just to the president, it's to the people, right? Like, you are an advocate for the press in that building as well, are you?
You are. I mean, you work for the president.
George Bush brought press with him on 9/11 to the undisclosed location. They were on Air Force One, even on that terrible.
Yes, and every president has brought press to war zones. Every single president has. President Clinton also had a moment where he had to switch planes. They included the press in that discussion. There is a long history here of the White House and the Defense Department, the State Department, having conversations with major news organizations, major media, major networks, but also wire services, and saying the president is going to be traveling to Iraq or Afghanistan or Pakistan or a country where we can't announce in advance he's going. And you know what these outlets do? They respect that. There's an embargo, which means that it's not reported until everybody involved is safe.
They tell nobody. They show up at Joint Base Andrews, and then they fly with the president, report it out as they would, as appropriate, when allowed, and return home.
Yeah, and of course the Secret Service should take steps to make sure any president is safe, although there has been reporting now from the Washington Post questioning whether this was an actual threat. But presidents can come back to the Secret Service, and this is what President Clinton did, and say, I need a different plan. I need a plan where I can tell my staff and I can tell the press and trust that they're not going to share. That's not what he did, and he would have kept it secret had it not been reported out.
Or famously, Stephanie Grisham, who you may remember was one of the press secretaries in the first term, sort of body blocked the North Korean security guards to allow the press into the room then. It's one of the responsibilities that comes with the job. We were talking about Iran. Let me ask you about the situation with Iran right now. We've seen the president's tone on Iran change in recent days, low-keying it, he says, where he may be leaning further into this idea of economic pressure. The president, on, by my count, 6, maybe 7 times, has had these sort of apocalyptic threats of World War III and these attacks on Iran, and then has backed away at the last minute. What does that do to the credibility? You're a communicator. What does that do to the credibility of the president, of the U.S., when you deliver a warning like that so many times and consistently back away from it?
Well, look, I think a big part of his audience is obviously the American public. He's saying there's control of the Strait of Hormuz. That's not accurate. Anybody knows it's not accurate because there's a blockade currently. There are a limited number of ships that are going through. It's not working as it should be working. And we're headed toward a place where the status quo of nobody getting paid to have ships go through is going to change in all likelihood. So people know that. But I also think if you're consuming what he's telling the public right now, you also are seeing reporting at the same time of soldiers who have been stationed there right near the Strait of Hormuz for months and months and months who aren't getting the food they need to get. There's been reporting about some of them jumping over the ship because they're depressed.
Yep.
That is, people have eyes, they have ears, they are consuming information. He does not have any credibility on the war with Iran. He clearly doesn't have a plan, but he didn't have a plan for why to go in. This is why presidents before him decided not to do what he has done.
I want to pivot. There's a recent headline, of course. Todd Blanche, in his first day, announced this new legal memo that basically would protect the president's communications with private advisors, not just those who work for the government, but other outside individuals. There's the potential if Democrats take over the House, there'll be a lot of investigations. That would protect a lot of the conversations the president's happening. Why is it so problematic for those conversations to be protected with a non-government individual?
Well, first of all, a question I hope somebody is asking the White House right now is how are you defining, or the Justice Department, private advisors? Because this is a key thing. First of all, if conversations between Steve Bannon and the president are covered by this, I think there's an issue with that too, because there are reasons why the public should have access to information. But with this particular president, this is a guy, is he going to say Jeff Bezos is an advisor who should be covered by this? Is he going to say, Jeff Bezos, if you give a little bit of money to my rehab of the East Wing, then we're going to give you a special government contract?
Or a member of his family who controls some of his finances.
Or a member of his family, or one of his sons. These are things we have seen occur. There are a lot of things to poke about this. I certainly hope people are going to continue poking that, but the reason why there should be concern here is the potential for rampant corruption.
Todd Blanche spoke in the last 45 minutes. Let's listen to what he said there about his mission.
I promise you that I will focus on our core mission, which is to uphold the rule of law fairly and impartially, to keep this great country safe, and to protect the rights of every citizen in this country.
Speaking of DOJ staffers there, does he come in with credibility before those, a lot of whom are not political figures, are those who have come from one administration to the next?
I would suggest anyone pull up on social media the clap-in
Merrick Garland
and Todd Blanche, and just compare the two. And there are legitimate critiques of Merrick Garland, but I think Todd Blanche, you could see the discomfort of career Department of Justice employees. And remember, these are people who, many of whom have served decades working for Republican and Democratic presidents. They have never seen the kind of intervention and overlording from the White House that is happening right now. That is a natural source of discomfort if you're a Department of Justice lawyer. This is a man who sees his primary job as being the lawyer to the president and not the lawyer for the United States. And that's very uncomfortable if you're working there.
You're going to talk to Senator Mark Kelly a little bit later this evening. He is in Iowa right now. Your spidey sense as you watch this, there's a lot at stake in Iowa right now. Iowa has changed. You've been a part of many different administrations, but in particular as it relates to Iowa, all of a sudden it looks like it may be a little bit more blue than has felt in recent months and years.
It certainly does. First of all, I mean, my old boss Barack Obama did an ad with Josh Turek, who's running for Senate, which tells you something, because that guy's quite selective, as any former president is, about who he's going to do campaigning with. Iowa, remember, Barack Obama won it in 2008 and 2012. It's become quite red since then. A lot has also changed. The issues that have been prominent for the Trump administration, putting tariffs in place, getting rid of rural hospitals, those are big issues that impact a state like Iowa. Rob Sand is running, as you just are showing on your screen right now, for governor. He's currently ahead. He's running on waste, fraud, and abuse, which is phrasing that you often hear more from Republicans. And he could quite well become the first Democratic governor in quite some time in that state.
You talk about, last question, you talk about waste, fraud, and abuse. I just want to get, again, you are a seasoned messenger. That's what your responsibility and what your skill set is. The president has now, according to the Washington Post, spent or plans to spend $900 million on construction projects, the fountains, the statues with gold plating over them right now. How do you, for a Republican community administration that sells itself as being fiscally conservative, how do you message that to Americans?
You can't. They are in an incredibly difficult position. You've heard private complaints. I wish more of them would say it publicly if they felt that way about this. This is one of the things that you hear a lot of complaining from Republicans about for a couple reasons. One is some of this is taxpayer money, as we know. Taxpayers don't like that, including taxpayers who are in red states. Another reason is that some of this is from donors. We don't know who these donors are. It's not disclosed. What are they getting in exchange? We don't know the answer to that. And the third reason is that it is not even being done efficiently. If you're in the business community and the president of the United States is giving out all these no-bid contracts, which is what most of this is being done with, those are not cost-effective. They're much more expensive. They're bloated, and often they don't get the job done. So a lot of reasons to be pissed off.